Brilliant. Okay. Louis Kahn, why imperfect and why hero? Well, Kahn had what most of us have as architects, which is a pressing desire to put a form of ideas into every project, often at its detriment. And I'll show two early projects which had that. But he was a hero too, and he transcended this. Although he didn't change his manner of operation, somehow he made it all work, and that's what I aim to show. Kahn was born in Estonia in 1901, came to Philadelphia in 1906, and lived there for the whole of his life. And he took Beaux-Arts training at University of Philadelphia. He took architectural training at University of Pennsylvania with Paul Cret, who's a French emigre who studied at the Beaux-Arts in Paris. And while Cret was a confirmed Beaux-Arts architect, as were many architects at that time, Cret believed that modern democracy would achieve its own architectural expression. And he said, our architecture is modern and cannot be anything else. So Kahn should never be seen as a traditionalist. He was always a progressive. And like Roscoe or Frank Gehry, he defined himself at a certain point in his career, quite late. It was in 1951 when he was, he was 51 years old, which is not, it's not old for an architect, I can say. And his career had started in the 1930s in the Great Recession. He had a lot of work that didn't get built. And he went from being a respected local architect to an architect of international acclaim in 10 years. Kahn's drawings are wonderful for me. They are full of an architect's imagination. The drawing is beautiful. This is one of hundreds of sketches that you might find, which shows an idea he had for Philadelphia, which was conspicuously and consistently rejected by the Philadelphia city planner because it didn't work. But in a sense, the poetry of it is so overwhelming. And Kahn proposed parking garages in the base of circular buildings. And this was part of Kahn's way of embracing the world as it was, motor cars, building services, and things like that. What we notice over in this corner is a very intriguing building, a geodesic office building proposal. And for a while, through Ann Ting, who works in his office and with whom he had a relationship and a child, and treated rather badly, I might say, but Ann Ting was a geometer and was in touch with Buckminster Fuller, and Fuller was not dissimilar to Kahn in that he was a romantic and turned technical issues into representational issues. But Ann Ting's contribution to this building and others in quite a small over has been forgotten. And my ex-student, Sofia Del Bono, will rectify that by giving a talk on Ann Ting's work in the future of this program, and that's not to be missed. The Yale University Art Gallery. Before I go to this, what I want to talk about is Kahn's geometric thinking. Geometry for him had some mystical association, or it was a Platonic ideal, and he very frequently articulated buildings into parts. And this was completely different from the European functionalism, where forms and appearance would be generated by use in order to give a legitimate architecture for modern times. He saw this as part of order, and order was a cultural construct. And he saw the archetypes of order in human history. And his geometricization stemmed from a deep feeling the architecture of antiquity. And you can see that in the study drawings that he made quite late in life. He also spoke a lot about structure. And in some ways, like Mies van der Rohe, his attitude to structure was more mystic than realistic. And Oscar Commandant, his engineer, was brutal actually about Kahn's attitude to structure. He said Kahn was completely ignorant of structural engineering. He lacked the basic knowledge of structural materials and hid his lack of knowledge behind arrogance and his position. I don't think that's wholly true, as we'll see. But in the building we're going to first consider, the Yale University Art Gallery, which is the first major public building that he got late in life. It's not a success in my estimation, not in the interior. It's, you can see here's a die-grid ceiling, staircase in the middle. It's rather a bad art space, I think. The idea, I think, was that you could put partitions anywhere. And perhaps this was because it was early in his career, but Kahn complained that that the gallery was being used in a different way. He said, if I were to build a gallery now, I would really be concerned about building places which are not used freely by the director as they want. And a good building is one the client can't destroy by the wrong use of space. But I think he relented on that. I think that was the anxiety that came from the first significant building he made. But I don't have an image of the gallery space, but it's not a success. The light's in the wrong place, and the shape is very peculiar. It has this wonderful staircase, which developed more significantly in the Yale Centre for British Art, which we'll look at. But the facades are lovely. This is a facade which almost certainly was influenced by Le Corbusier, who Kahn read a lot. And it's a facade you might see in Corbusier's early buildings. And the side elevation is wonderful. I mean, we know that there's no structural purpose to this. We know that it simply uses the floor as positions for decor. But in reality, it is a striking thing. And Kahn had this ability to make a graphically superimposed surface say something. It wasn't mere ornament. It said something. It didn't do very much, but it said something. The Richards Medical Building that we all visited, I visited with the students last year, again is an early project which I think has problems. Interestingly, it's a series of small rooms where people can look from across them to each other, but also look out to the city. And to be fair, Kahn made the proposition that scientists shouldn't work in the lab, they should have a studio. And this is something that he carried out more fully in the Salk Institute. But it's just been recently restored. It's very difficult to restore it because it's all single glazing. And so it can't really be used with anything. And this is one of the problems. I mean, we all make buildings like this, and it's why we're imperfect. But when you look at the photography, when you look at what's being said here purely as architectural interests, the structure is, the visible structure is like something from an animal skeleton, and the towers we can recognize from Italy, from Renaissance Italy. And this side facade has all of the nonsensical qualities that I spoke about earlier, but as a thing to look at, it is a very, very beautiful and very strong piece of design. I should say that I started off with a long list of Kahn buildings, and it got shorter and shorter. And I chose only the ones where I could say something. I chose the ones to which I could emote, and it meant that schemes like the Salk Institute, which is a fantastic building, but I can't get anything to say. I'm not saying it. But I'm talking about the Esrick House, which again we visited, and I'm showing photographs from the book because mine are just too terrible. But what we see here is a house in 3 parts: the entrance in the middle, and a double height living room, and then 2 floors on this side with a bedroom and a kitchen and dining room. And oh dear, hang on. Yeah, here we go. What you see here is the start of Kahn's tendency to want to make the facade design have openings in it that are bigger than you can put glass in and should put glass in. So he makes the opening bigger. This is something that occurs later in the Phillips Exeter building, but he makes a big opening, then he fills it, and he fills it. When he puts glass in, it doesn't open, which is sort of counterintuitive. And then in this project, he puts opening wooden shutters on the side. And and of course it compromises the scheme. And this building, the thermal insulation in this building is obviously terribly poor. I think it's a 9-inch cinder block, and these are uninsulated. So God knows what it's like in the winter, and it does get cold in Philadelphia, as we'll see. But to explain the plan, you come in here through a lobby, through an entrance porch, and there's a coat cupboard and kitchen and dining room. And then you go into this double height living room, which has got a fireplace, bookshelves, and then windows to the back garden. And then here you go up a stair and you arrive on a landing which overlooks the double height space. And it has what he says is a porch front and back, but you know this is, I mean, you'd never want to go out there because it's too small. And you know all of this, and all of this is to make something happen in the facade and to make some overlooking in the living room. And on this side, it's a bedroom, dressing room, bathroom, and study. But what I'm about to show will give some idea of how habitable it is. You could imagine living in this house, and the students that we took were completely aghast at its comfort. It's a combination of elegance and comfort. And you can see in this photograph all the windows are open. But it's unbelievably good space and very difficult. You can't ever photograph inside because the owner never wants it. But here it is in winter with the shutters closed. And, sorry, I'm having a problem changing. Here we go. Sorry, it's changing very slowly. Bear with me. Yeah. So that's the inside. The facade facing the street has just a narrow window and then bookshelves. And then a window which reveals that the chimney of the fireplace stands away from the house. It's absolutely irrational, but absolutely captivating. And at certain points, architects can defy logic with form, and this is one of the instances where Kahn does. But if you go up to the landing, that you get this long view, top view, and you see out of the top window and through here. And that leads you to look at one of these porches. Then that whole wall, that's the gantry or the landing. And that whole wall is made of American redwood planks, very, very large. And the redwood, I think, red oak, which is, I think, the same timber that's used in the shutters. And this is really wonderful. You can see there's a post there and these planks slot into it. And these planks are held together in the middle by a wooden fitting. And what strikes me about this is that, yes, we know in modernism that the appearance of an object or a part of a building had to come from its use and material. But I think something else is happening here, and this is speculation on my part, and I might be held down. But it seems to me that this is from another tradition, a tradition that's tinged with Shaker construction. If you know Shaker construction, it simplicity of objects, and it made objects, and it made buildings that are very simple. But that simplicity wasn't what we see in the modern movement. It was simplicity where it was to represent a kind of purity or a state of being. And I think some of that I sense in this piece of construction. At Phillips Exeter, Kahn made the library. Phillips Exeter is a rather posh, well, very posh secondary school in New Hampshire, and has this very sober building set in a field, so it's quite special. And as we saw in the Esherick house, the openings are very, very large, fixed glazing in them, and then elements that can move, as I'll show. And it's connected to a dining hall by Kahn. I don't have any photographs of it. And that is connected to another building by Kahn, rather cute detail. And again, a window of fixed glazing above an opening door. So some of these openings can open, some of them are fixed. Some of them don't have any glazing in because there's a roof, series of roof balconies. And this is the plan. This plan doesn't show the level that you enter. You enter on the floor below here, and you come up a staircase to this level, which is the main level where the librarian sits, and there's a study area. And as I understand it, it's a colonnade around the bottom, which is separated about here. And then above, there's a central atrium with a roof light above it, book stacks, and then on three sides here, reading carrels, study carrels. And this is the standard view you get of this building, the one that says, look, it's about a big structure with holes in it. But it's much more than that. It's when you walk around it, when you go into it, it's much more three-dimensional. Kahn, I think, worked with physical models, with physical models a lot, and was able to, I suppose, see the plastic reality of what he was doing. So his diagrammatics, his geometry it was never static, it was always mobile. And the staircase is a sort of wonder. It's the point of entry and has two arms. And a fiendishly difficult detail, a concrete structure with a curve underneath it, clad in stone, I've forgotten the name, but my memory's going, in stone. And you can see it's from the classical tradition. But as I said earlier, it works in combination with things it's in the foreground and it works with things in the background. So at the top, this is where you arrive. You arrive at this point, and then the balusters on this side continue this drawing. It's in travertine, sorry. And you, looking down, this is the point of entry. And then it has some structure here, which is supporting all of this. And then the bookcases here project out. So why do they do that? Well, to save space, but there's something else as well. They do that because somehow making the books float in the air says something about learning, or is very suggestive of what would you say, makes unnatural the book storage. And again, when you look down, this is what you see. And the reading carrels are arranged in pairs, between brick piers, and then the book stacks are in the middle. And these windows are supposed to light the book stacks. They don't, in fact, and you can see it's got fluorescent lighting in it. And there's a big window here, and then a window that can be closed with a shutter. So you have some degree of personalization. You can see that the light changes, and the person using it's altered the light in order to suit their reading. And one thing to say that in Kahn's buildings is that nothing really is for chance. These lights are not just something he added. If you look, the horizontals of the lights, the horizontals of the concrete work, composed with the verticality of the windows. So it's an extremely simple method, but it works incredibly well, and it's not overt, it's in the background. And at certain points, the structure comes down very close to you, and it's the same size as a book stack, so there's a sort of ambiguity, kind of ambiguity that Venturi completely misunderstood. And then next to it, there's a service riser, and service riser isn't just a service riser, it has a drinking fountain in it. So there's again, like the book stacks projecting, this is enlivened by the treatment that Kahn gives it. And a window, overhead panel on the door that goes up to the ceiling. And then on the roof kicks in to give this space a more, I would say, domestic feeling. And then on the top, where there's that room's enclosed with glass, and there's outside balconies or outside spaces within the building envelope. The horizontal of this works with the vertical of the wall beyond. And this is what makes buildings great, when the detail isn't just well done and it isn't just constructively sound. It's when the detail crystallizes the purpose of the larger purposes of the building. And that most architects simply don't recognize. In Fort Worth in Texas, Kahn made the Kimball Art Museum in 1966, 72. And you can see this is heavily geometric. It's a series of 6 arched forms, which Kahn continuously called vorts. But Commandant said they couldn't be vorts because Kahn cut the middle out of them, so they're actually beams. But it's in a park here, and you enter it either from the park through a space here, or you come up from each side, as I'll show. And here's the plan. So on the front part, this arch here is simply a place to sit in the shade, and you go right in. There's another arch which gives you shelter at the entry point, and then there are gallery spaces here and here, and then a courtyard that I'll show, one here and one here. So you approach the building, and there's a pond of very shallow water spilling over the edge. And so you experience that sitting in the shade of this arched element here. And that's what it looks like as you approach from the park. You go through a rather European gravel courtyard with trees on it. It's unlike anything else I've seen in Texas. And as I say, there are spaces in these arches outside for you simply to sit. If you approach from the road, you come up here and you see a composition of concrete and travertine, which is very much like the early Renaissance, where rather than using projections to make a classical facade, the early schemes used different materials. As you walk along here in this space, you see there's also some water. So it's very subtle and very, very urban and generous. On the other side, the approach is along a step ramp. And looking over this wall, you see the car park And as I said, Kahn's desire was to incorporate every element of, or the symbolic elements of modern life in his architecture. So here's the entry point. There are 2 stairs up here from the basement. There's a shop. And that's the first courtyard that I'll show. But before we'll do that, we'll just look at these galleries. These are the general galleries. And I'll explain this lighting in just a second. But as you approach this courtyard, you see that there's I think a Malol sculpture, I can't remember, but it's an outdoor space inside the gallery with a net roof which gives some shade and protection from insects. So within the gallery space, you have a place to sit. It's incredibly luxurious. And further along, there's another courtyard with a pool by Kahn. I think that's a Lemberg sculpture, I can't be sure. And then that wall of travertine, which is weathering in a very beautiful way. And it has a roof of mesh. And it has that roof of mesh has spotlights in it. So on an evening, you could imagine it being a very beautiful space to sit. If there were an opening crowded with people, these would be the places you go to. But to go back to the galleries, nobody would make a gallery like this anymore. If you make a gallery now, the expectation is that it's very neutral. You know, the walls are white, the floor is one of a few chosen materials, and it's the art that's on display. But in this building and the Yale Centre for British Art, we'll see these are quite heavily figured buildings, not overly. They're not like Sterling's buildings, where like the Frog Museum, which just calls attention to itself. This really understands the collection. It's a bold collection, as we'll see. And now's the moment to explain this lighting. And I want to say it actually does look like this when you're there. It's not bad camera work. And it works like this. There's a slot in the ceiling, which infuriated Oscar Commandant. The light, a tiny amount of light comes in, and something happens to it. It's reflected on the soffit of the concrete, but it's also diffused. And then that's the place for track and spot. And then on the sides, presumably that's a gutter, but on the sides there's a space for building services, for air, I suppose. And it's intriguing, you know, it does something, and its form is not functional. It functions, but it's not a functionalist form. And it's something you want to look at. It's surprising, you know. Often in galleries, the lighting is the most intrusive part. The ceiling is the part that works least well. Here, it works beautifully. Somehow there's no attempt at minimalization. There's just the necessary things treated very beautifully. And this is what I meant to say. This is the collection. The collection is richly colored. And some of the walls are in travertine. Some of the floor is in travertine. And it works. It works. And it reminds me of a moment when I was in Lucerne a long time ago. And the gallery there was a white gallery. And the director explained to me that originally it had been designed with small rooms with wallpaper, because that was the kind of setting that Matisse and Picasso expected to hang their work on, because their clients were bourgeois. And so the Matisse painting was never intended to go on a white wall. It was intended to go on a heavily decorated surface. And so what I'm saying is there are lots of different ways of displaying art, and this is one of them, a great way. And the partition system is very beautiful. You know, the mechanics of it, or rather the way that it fits together, is very evident. But it's also very elegant. From this side, you don't see the support. On this side, you do. And it works in the alignments of the ceiling, and it becomes part of this. And the staircase handrail, well, this is I think it's bead plastered stainless steel. It's certainly stainless steel. And it's rolled. It's a rolled, it's not solid. You know, you would normally make a tube and weld it onto the wall, but this folds it, and it even goes down to a foot in stainless steel. So that's where Kahn, as I said earlier, invigorates your sight, invigorates your touch, the care, and not just the technical care, but the care in terms of the transmission of experience in these details is wonderfully, well, it's worth noting, deeply noting. And then further along, there's the lecture hall, which is too narrow in a way. You know, it's too narrow and too long. And I don't know if this has daylight in it, but certainly this is being used for lighting. So it's kind of cheeky and rather perverse. And then the space in the way that I like most is the library, which is in the attic above the back of the building. And the lights are jammed right up to the ceiling and right up to this light fitting. So it's very uncomfortable in the best possible way. It's extraordinary. And again, it gets you very close to this light fitting. And it gets you to understand it's made of anodized aluminium. And Kahn and his office have understood the expressive potential of that material. And then, surprisingly, the only windows are at the end, and they face onto the blank wall of the arch next to it. And in a hot climate with bright sun, that's not such a crazy move. But some of the offices in the basement are not very good. This one is particularly good. And interestingly, Renzo Piano, who worked in Kahn's office, made a gallery in Texas called the Nasher Gallery, which is interesting. But all of the office space is in the basement there too, and it's not very well handled. But I think with Kahn, mostly it is. And I haven't seen this room, but the Wunderkammer, I suppose, is the painting restoration studio in the basement with all this sky. I can imagine that being a wonderful space, but I didn't see it. What I did see are the office spaces. And although there's I'd say about 1.50 meters or 2 meters space between the window and this very high wall, it has dignity and calm. In a way, it's a place you'd want to be on a hot day. I think what's striking in this building and the Domeno, the Kimball, is how he is able to take a developing set of ideas and apply them to a specific project in a specific location and make them say something different. This is Kahn's it's called the second project. It was near the final project, and it shows a building, the concrete structure visible on the outside, filled with some kind of paneling, and then this side would be open, and there's in the corner there's an entrance, and this street down here is Kahn's earlier Yale gallery that I showed. But it didn't turn out like that. It turned out something far more wonderful. It turned out that the paneling became turn-coated stainless steel, or at least that's what people think it is, but it's not been identified yet. And each panel is different. Each panel reflects the light differently. And you would think that maybe that would create an order for the fenestration, but no, it didn't. Kahn and his office allow this fenestration to be what the room needs, maybe too much so, but and what you can see is sometimes you can look up and see through the roof lights of the gallery space. And then really strange and in a way unexpected combinations of scale, very clumsy. Clumsy in other people's hands, in Kahn's hand, just shocking. And then on the rear side, these narrow windows, vertical narrow windows, and then one like this, one like that. And then in the car park, sorry, I missed my slide, but what these panels do is they have a drip, which is bigger than it needs to be. And that says one thing. And then the windows still in the shops. These shop fronts are all in stainless steel too, or some other metal. And the edge treatment's different. This one's about getting rid of the rain. And so it's a building detail which is made expressive. And this one is a building detail that's made tactile. So it's something you might think you could lean on if you ever thought you'd lean on it. And this drawing was of the west section, rather modestly composed vertical windows, but it didn't turn out like that. It's much more random, as I've said. And in the back of the car park, it's completely solid. There's something so well composed about this, about parking your car against that. And these rooms, as I'll show, look out into the car park. So the whole thing is made useful. The car parks are never incidental in Kahn's buildings. So in the side street, this is the main street that goes down to Yale, the School of Architecture. And the entrance to the building is here. It's just the corner left out. And in an uncanny way, consciously or unconsciously, it rhymes with the space under that bridge, or it does to my eye. And this is what it looks like. It's the lights are part of Kahn's incessant desire to bring building services into the formality of the building and to make them look like classical objects. So you see the entrance here. And then, of course, there's the fire hydrant and things like that. So it's all well handled. And throughout the building, things like this somewhere are just naturally there. The only thing I can't understand about Kahn's buildings is that the entrance doors are always so clumsy, but who am I to complain? So you come into the this base, which has stainless steel around the base and concrete, and then it has oak above it, and it's a space of some dignity. It's just an entrance space. It occasionally has art in it. And the stainless steel is very affecting in a way. But when you look up, you see an atrium like this. So you see a concrete structure, just as you saw on the outside of the building, on the inside of the building. And this is the plan. So on the floor below, you would have entered here and gone into this space and looked up. And on the floor above, there are galleries all around here, including here, and a staircase and lifts, which I'll now show you. So from that entrance space, you go under this low beam. So it's very, the lowness is important. And if you go to St. Catherine's College by Arne Jacobsen, the entrance is very low and very horizontal. And it's not what most clients would expect, but it provides this wonderful moment of compression. Then you go outside and you find the landscape, and something different happens here. I think what happens is that the upper rooms are brought close to you. Then there's a space to sit, and then there are the lifts. And the lifts, of course, are part of Kahn's repertoire of contemporary necessities that are built into the scheme. And then you see the staircase, which of course is a wonder. And then on top of it is a glass lenscrete roof, and it's beneath the roof line, so it's daylit. In the depth of the building, it's daylit. And you leave that space to come into the lift lobby here. And you find that Kahn understood the collection. He understood that 18th century work, 18th century sculpture could stand against a wall of concrete. But the gallery spaces on this level are really skillful. They may look just like gallery spaces, but I hope to tell you why they are so skillful. They're top lit and sometimes side lit. But the panel system allows you to go through these spaces in any way you want. And if you think of enfilade spaces like the Tate Britain, where you go through one to another, and they become very difficult to rehang. In this, you can see it lends itself to different characters. And you could imagine having a large space and then a series of small spaces. So it looks to me like an extremely flexible space for a curator. I mean, it's a fixed collection, so I imagine they don't do much changing, but and the fixed panel system works for that. And those panels are covered in fabric, in linen, so the whole, and there's carpet on the floor, so it's really domestic. And you can see that even the escape signs don't matter. And then you'll find an office on that floor, so it's not like most gallery spaces like the Marie Celeste, you've no idea who runs them, but here you can see there is activity. And the atrium here is the real wonder, because in a side-lit building, getting light into the centre is the real issue. Of course, it works well here because it's supported by roof lights, but further down, it's still very good. It doesn't light the artwork, but it lights the space, and the light changes being daylight, so it animates the space. So this is a very positive and thoughtful contribution to museology. And if we look at the courtyard in which the stairwell is located, we'll see that it's, you discover this, as you walk around, you discover this space. And you can see there's a roof light and the concrete roof light over the stair. And then at the base of it, there's the entrance to the library. Looking back from the entrance to the library, you can see this room. And Kahn does something extraordinary often in his buildings, which is that he suggests another type of building. And to me, maybe it's just me, but it suggests a baronial hall. It doesn't look like a baronial hall. It has none of the apparatus of a baronial hall, but it strongly suggests it. And this is a mark of a person who really can make architecture talk and suggest things. But the libraries are a kind of miniature version of the building itself. It has a small atrium inside it, and it has carrels, as in the Phillips Exeter, that look out the window, and they look over the car park unembarrassedly. But something about this conjunction of elements and the thought of sitting there on a sunny day reading a book and seeing your friend arriving by car, these are the kind of events that give life to a building. In fact, they're the life events that make you understand a building and like a building and identify with it. So the upper level is a study library, but the reason for showing it is the boldness with which these ducts are presented. And this riser in the library, this tiny space that you would think would be sacrosanct and wouldn't be permitted, everything would be hidden. With Kahn, no, it's just right there. You know, there's this amazing ability to have conjunctions of different types of architecture and different architectural expressions. And the lighting here rhymes with that, and it does, as I said earlier, it suggests that the lighting is part of a classical vocabulary. And even here, you know, even this asymmetry and apparent casualness is so striking to me. So Kahn's absolutely free in disposing materials in this gallery, as we saw. He'll put a riser in the gallery space with a a fireman's tap, or compose steel security doors with concrete against carpet. The last project I'll show is the Four Freedoms Park, and I have very few photographs of it. It was designed in 1973, and then it took a huge amount of time through the political machinations that were necessary. And it's only, well, it took 40 years to get it realized. And it's perplexing. It's on Roosevelt Island, and you arrive by a sort of cockamamie station or a intriguing funicular that ends up in the part of the town you don't want to be. And then you walk for a long way past this unrewarding lawn. And I have to say that I think the landscaping is very, not very good. But then you arrive at the end and you find Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the Four Freedoms. And who can deny the value of the Four Freedoms? And who can deny the skill of someone like Kahn, who with two gestures embraces the view of New York City? Thank you.
I've got a few questions coming in. William Ryle, I'm going to unmute you.
William Ryle from New York City. Hi, Bill.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
My question is about the comment that you made about Kahn's ambiguity at the library at Exeter, and which you said Robert Venturi completely misunderstood, which in a way, I suppose you have started to address that question in what you just said about people's misunderstanding of what their misunderstanding of Kahn, for sure, and Venturi being one of them. But how did you see that statement in light of the library design?
Well, it seems sort of strange and out of place in a way in its innocent campus full of rich children, you know, and it's rather severe. But it's not objectionable. It's not Sterling's library in Cambridge, which is unworkable. It's not that kind of architecture, which is propositional, and it just ignores what it's like to be in it. Kahn really does make it a comfortable place to work, and you could imagine working there. You could imagine studying in there. So I think I haven't really answered your question, Bill, and maybe I said something wrong, which I sometimes do in the heat of the moment. But I think the starting point for this lecture was to be critical of Kahn's imposition of geometry and his rigidity of thought. You know, if I hear him talking about a city being a place where a young man can discover what to do for the rest of his life, I think I'd strangle him, you know. But strangely enough, when I saw a video of him talking to the students where he was teaching, and he said that thing about what the brick wanted to be, it made perfect sense. You know, although I can't stand it, it made perfect sense in the setting. So, you know, one has to be more tolerant of his foibles. And we're not talking about an architect who's cynical. We're not talking about a lot of architects today who would dismiss Kahn, well, would hate Kahn actually, and dismiss him as an old humanist. You know, that was a kind of insult in the 80s in Dutch architecture. You know, the fast set criticized anybody who actually made a building that people might like to be in as an old humanist, because they were about the future. You know.
Andrew Berman.
Andrew. Two friends from New York, very nice. Hi, Andrew.
Andrew, you've got the mic. He's gonna try.
Come on, Andrew.
Can you shout? It's 3,000 miles away.
Shall I paraphrase the question? Question about the transition from architecture as dominated by thought to, in later work, architecture that is all experience.
Good question. We could think about Leveren's last week, which is highly experiential and has no evident intellectual structure, and certainly no geometric imposition. So it's possible. It just isn't how Kahn thought, but that's the range in which one would work for an expressive architecture. So, Bandar, I can't hear you. You
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tony, I had this wonderful privilege to live in New Haven for many years and drink up the Kahn buildings daily. And one thing that struck me was that the first art gallery is all thought, and it's a rather ponderous experience. And by the time he got to his last, the British Art Center, which you showed, it's all that thought is still present, and yet it's just all this pure experience. The light is palpable. Movement is, you dance as you're swept through the building somehow. And I just always marvel at this transformation that I see in his work that he had as an architect. I just wanted to ask you, of your tour, which buildings just absolutely perhaps elated you and will stay with you as experiences?
Well, the British art, because well, for all the reasons you've said, but also it's real skill in museology. Kimball is wonderful, but it's hardly visitable. You know, you go there once. And the Esherick House, these are the two that I really liked a lot. But, you know, all the other ones are great too. But I think one thing to say is that when Kahn made that first building, the Yale Art Gallery, he was 51 or 50, wow. I think. And actually, that's not old for an architect. You know, he'd had a long period of building hardly anything. And so he would have been anxious when he built that building. He would have been anxious that it would have worked right. And he probably sensed that it didn't. So, you know, architects are human beings. And you're absolutely right. I think as he worked, he understood more and more and more, and he got into the capabilities of his position, and it didn't strangle him. It opened up, you know. It didn't go away. It didn't do formless work. The structure was always there. The geometric structure was always there, but he made it work. He made it work in terms of habitability and pleasure. That, in a way, that's what we do as architects. We have one song and we sing it in different keys, you know, and we make it work. And if we're any good, we get it to be better and better, you know. But Kahn, well, I remember seeing Caesar talk, and I can imagine Kahn was the same. Caesar, when he spoke like any other architect. It wasn't about meta architecture, you know, or like some architects we know. He spoke about issues that all architects would understand. But the level of talent was right up there, and that was like Kahn. You know, Kahn, you can see dealing with all the things that we would deal with as architects, but you know, the level of thought, the level of talent's really high. And in a way, you only know that when you've built some more and made some mistakes, you know. Andrew, you're going to talk on this program, aren't you?
Yes, mid-June.
Yeah, listen to this guy. His work is very, very good.
Thank you, Tony.
Maurizio Sabini.
Hi, Tony. Thank you for your very interesting talk. You know, very interesting for me, who I've been fascinated with Kahn since my postgraduate studies here in the US. In spite of my Italian name, I'm based in the US. But I was struck by your comment just in passing about being critical of the use of geometry by Kahn, which is, on the other hand, something that always fascinated me, in that he, especially because of his use of simple geometry. I always related that to the famous warning by Leon Battista Alberti to his colleagues at the time of Renaissance, fascinated with complicated systems of proportions. He reminded the architects, use the simple proportions, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and the likes.
Yeah.
And and Kant's sticking to simple geometries as a grammar of space, in a sense, always fascinated me. Why? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I can say why I'm uneasy with it, because as a European, you exist in a situation of principle. As a British architect, I'm an empiricist. I'm used to one thing determining the other. And British classicism, for example, in Adam, wasn't strict. It was composed by eye. Proportions might be adjusted so that the outside and the inside work together. So it's just my orientation that makes me say that. It's something I see, but I can't bring myself to do it. It's not natural to me. And so my reaction to it is cultural. It's not right or wrong, it's just cultural.